Did you want to cover? Did you want to take a shot at that?
Yeah.
Or do you have another?
So regarding the HTML lesson, once you write up your code, you're supposed to execute it to see if it actually worked. Um, and if it does, you would end up with basically a blank web page with the words "Hello World" written in the actual like white space of your page after it's loaded. And that's how you know that your code had worked and that you wrote it correctly.
Okay, my problem is these instructions did not. I looked at the tutoring class. It didn't tell me how to execute it. Was I supposed to go
Okay.
enter or what? It did not tell me how to execute. That's the problem.
So in this context, for a web browser, execute just means to open that file that you saved with the web browser. And there's a couple different ways that that can be done. But the easiest way to do that is to open a browser and then drag and drop your file straight into the browser. If you Sorry, I'm trying to load this up in the background while
So
I'm
what
talking
I
to you.
did
So,
was I copied and pasted what everything I entered and put it into the search browser. That's what I did.
so what you should have done, okay, so for my example, the example I did for my class is I made this hello stuffus.html, basically just following the instructions in the book. All you really need to do is right click on this file and hit open or open with and open it in Firefox or Chrome. And when you pull it up, now mine's a little bit different than the actual assignment was, in that when I was talking to my class, I was also typing stuff. Uh, so this is what it means to open it in Chrome, is to literally say file open with Chrome and then go find that file on your hard drive and load it up. And then it'll either work or it won't work. You notice if you
Okay, well
if you right click.
I need
Mm-hmm.
extra help, so you can just move on. You don't have to stay with this. I need to go step more help for steps going forward because I did it completely wrong.
Okay. Um, we definitely can at the end of class we can walk you through and figure
Okay,
out what you did and what you should have
that's
done.
fine.
Uh, Sound good? Okay.
Yep.
And
So
also, ma'am,
any other?
I'm sorry, and also, ma'am, you put it in the group chat during the week if you have any problems. If someone, I could have helped you with that. But if you just put it in the group chat, if someone sees it, they may be able. Because I check the group chat throughout the week, and I would have tried to help you.
Okay. The thing about it was it was so late that day. I didn't know it, when I'm the last minute person, and then by the time I got to it and everything, it was too late for anybody to be up that time of day. So I was on my
Well,
own.
you may be shocked. That's about when lots of the assignments get turned in. I'm always shocked to find out how many people turn it in, and you can tell they hit the submit button before, but by the time they entered everything in, they were like 12:02, 12:03, something like that. It always cracks me up.
Yeah.
You are definitely, that is probably the fastest time for you to get help from someone else right then. It's when everybody else is frantically turning in their homework. But as far as the content goes, just kind of like I said, brief overview style. Everybody really gets the idea of like what it is we're trying to do here. Um, since I'm the course lead, I'm going to babble on for a second about the intent of the course. Hopefully, it's been kind of clear, and Ms. Halliday has been making it clear as we go through that we're really trying to add a narrative to the course this semester so that it's a lot tighter tied into things that you're going to need to know, things that you're going to have to do in other classes. And so that's why sometimes we're kind of beating some basic concepts into the ground, like this typing stuff up in Notepad or Visual Studio Code. In our class, we are trying to help you learn HTML by giving you examples and working you through examples. And we're going to be using Dreamweaver so that you don't have to memorize as much. It's more about trying to get you to think about how you're using it, what you're doing, and then looking and saying, okay, this is the code that I generated. This is the code that I could have typed up. And Dreamweaver just kind of gives you both. That being said, it's not an industry standard tool. Nobody uses it anymore. And the reason why we're not using a more complex tool is that our web development classes already teach better tools. So we're kind of using this as an introductory tool so that we can go through and actually do something and learn about requirements and learn about design and learn about the process of software design, and then get used to the idea of being able to drop in the code and saying, okay, these boxes on the page really mean this text in the window. They are the same things, and start getting you used to the idea of just kind of imagining the structure of things, because that's the same in all programming languages. That process of analyzing what you need to know and using that to solve a problem. This is just a very specific problem with a very easy programming language. And as I've been telling my seated classes, there's really a couple options for this class. You may discover that you love it and go and say, oh, I'm going to take more classes in this direction, and this is a great thing. It's a great way to earn side money. HTML and CSS programming is great for gig economy type jobs. There's always people that need websites developed. And so some of you will be like, yay. Some of you may hate it. And you're going to say, I will never touch anything like that again. And that is totally fine, because you can still get through this class and kind of hate every minute of it. That's something that works. Hopefully you're in cybersecurity if you hate every minute of this class, because all the other certificates that come through this class should at least find some parts of it fun. The cybersecurity people, maybe they're just not interested in any of it, but at least this class will give you a solid concept of, this is what a server is. This is where files are on the internet. This is how we move things around. And even the cybersecurity people are going to need to learn some kind of scripting language at some point in their career, because you do not want to be the guy that has to install the same software with the same configuration on 400 machines. Like, that's not, you want to know how to do loops, and you want to know how to do bash scripting. So the concepts still hold up, even if you are not a programming guy. So it's just good to get you in the idea of saying, okay, this is what the front end looks like. This is my web page. This is the pretty parts. And this is what the back end looks like. This is what our source code looks like. Here's how we structure things. Here's how we lay things out. And then when we go on to other classes, you'll either learn how to do structured programming, where you add while loops and for loops and things like that, and be able to do things conditionally and execute a sequence of steps to do something, or you'll be learning other kinds of data access languages or something like that. So a lot of people that don't like this course, they may want to stick with front end type programming, and they know they want maybe business analytics. They want to stay with tools, but it's still good for them to know what's behind the scenes and what's going on. So this course has now been designed to kind of just introduce these concepts. Hopefully we're trying to make it a little bit more entertaining, but that's why we set it up the way that we set it up, where we have been spending a few weeks talking about, okay, what is it that would make a website have value? You know, our final project, the goal that some people, you know, it's very loose, and it's intentionally very loose, because the idea is, if we can't make you come up with an idea that sounds interesting to you, then you're not going to play with it enough to actually learn the stuff that you need to learn. And we'll end up, as we've sometimes struggled with in the past, is people that just kind of like stumble their way through the course and try never to think about it again. We're trying to make this something that will actually provide some value. The idea of having a personal introduction website is something that is just kind of, is a very standard tasking across a lot of computer science departments. And the goal is, as you move through other classes, you'd be able to add to this until you finally have something, to link to your LinkedIn resume, show yourself off a bit, get yourself hired. And I think that's what a lot of our main goal is, to get a new job, better job, upgrade at our jobs as we're going through this. So that's why we kind of focus it on highlighting yourself. That being said, I know a lot of people tried to ask if they could go off in a different way. They didn't really want to talk about themselves, and they want to make it a personal interest website of some kind. And that's okay too, as long as you remember that we're still trying to get you to think about what it is you're trying to accomplish. We don't want you just saying, hey, I'm going to have a pretty website that meets my audience's needs. Because what is the target audience for our website? Like, what is that concept? Like, why do we have a target audience?
Well, you need a target audience. You need to know your target audience because you need to know who you serve. You want to inspire them to you want them to do certain things. You want them to act certain ways. You may want them to purchase something. You may want them to react or to purchase or to interact with you or your website. So understanding your target audience helps you gear that toward, for example, this real world. Like say if you're a teacher, you want to put your lesson plans together and you're teaching kindergarten, you wouldn't put together fifth grade work. Right. So you want to target the audience so they get something out of it and so that you add value to whatever it is they're doing. That makes sense?
Yeah, absolutely. You've got a target audience because you have an objective. So that gets us into, I notice, in my classes, I'm not sure, I haven't gone through y'all's classes, but in my classes, we had a lot of people that had an objective, like they'll have a good impression of me. Is that a good objective for your website? Saying that they'll like me.
Not necessarily.
Okay, why not?
Because you want, if that's what your goal is, to have them like you. But if you want particular people to act on your website, then you need to think about what you would put in the website that would target them, that would invite them, or engage
You
them.
said a keyword. Eric said the same keyword. Anyone know what that keyword is?
I'm assuming it's to interact or to interact.
Interact. Yeah. It doesn't matter if there's no action. Just kind of like in academics. A lot of times we get in trouble because we teach to the assessment. Because if we can't assess it, then how do we know it happened? And so you think on your website, you say, well, I want them to like me. Okay, how do you measure that? If you want to literally measure that, put a like button on there. And then the goal isn't for them to like me, it's for them to like me. I want them to like my page. I want them to click the like button. I want them to subscribe and follow. I want them to connect with me on LinkedIn. I want them to do something that demonstrates something has taken place. Because a personal website about me targeting an employer has no value to me unless that employer contacts me. Like, they can like me all they want, but if I don't get the job, that's good for them. I'm glad they enjoyed their time on my website. That's not my problem. What I want is for them to contact me. I want them to schedule an appointment. I want them to click a button, link with me on social media, something to demonstrate that like. So we need to have that in mind. And that's why, this last one, we wrote a little bit of content and we're supposed to address that content to a specific page, with the idea being like, okay, if I'm writing content and it's my personal resume, that probably doesn't belong on an about me page or a contact page. It belongs on a resume page or an experience page. About me should be things that someone might want to know about me, something about my personality, the way I like to work, my philosophy on education, something like that is about me. And we got to think about, okay, what I want them to do. This is why I went back and we drew our site maps in 3. We say, okay, here's how I imagine somebody sitting at my computer or their computer, starting on my homepage and then getting to this call to action. I imagine them going through my About Me page. And then from my About Me page, I imagine that they'll go over to my resume page. And then if they're interested, they'll go to my Contact Me page. And then that's where the form will be. So I can imagine this flow through my document. And so I say, well, what kind of content do I need? Well, the kind of content I need is what will convince them to move forward. The About Me content needs to be something, you know, I said, maybe my educational philosophy if I was trying to get another job. Yeah, Brandon.
So I just had a question. So I just wonder from like your perspective, how do you create a website without going down a rabbit hole, constantly trying to add new things, make it better, and constantly trying to edit it, even though it might be a good website? It's just like you're just stuck in a rabbit hole trying to always improve.
With great difficulty, and by focusing on the call to action, you know, just in any development project, tasking can always, we call it scope creep. You know, you can always think of one more thing, one more thing, one more thing. There's always one more thing. There's an old saying that you can't let perfection be the enemy of good enough. You have to know what your objective is, and when you achieve that objective, then by all means, if you have the time and budget, make it better. But you have to know what good enough is. You need to guide them and say, okay, this is the path. For websites, a little easy because I can say, this is the path I want them to take. This is what I should put on my About Me page to make them interested enough to click on my resume page, which should make them interested enough to click on my Contact Me page. And I'll give you guys a little, you know, little sidebar, dirty hint here. What's the very first thing an actual senior developer will do if a hiring manager gives them your personal website?
Say, look at the code.
Absolutely. If you got past this, the first thing I'm going to do, even before I read the content, is I'm going to right click, hit view source, and start looking if the person that wrote this code writes the kind of code that I want to read. And if I see template information at the top, I just stop reading. And if I see built by WordPress or something like that at the top, then I'm very skeptical of what I read next. If I don't see things like comments, then I might just stop reading. If it's not indented properly, any code that goes onto this website should be pristine, not just to appease Miss Halliday, but to appease anybody that is potentially, when you think about like, what do I do to get to my target audience? Well, part of your target audience is that senior developer that you want to work with. And you got to think about this in terms of, okay, what does he want to work with? I want it to be pretty. I want it to be clean. I want it to be up to date and modern. Up to date and modern is something that we will talk through as we go through. Well, we won't, but y'all will talk through as we go through your book about this is what we used to do, this is what we do now. And so by imagining that path that I expect the developer to take, I expect him to check my code, and then I expect him to come back and look for my experience, look for my certification. So I know what I need to have on this website, and I know what's extra or not, right? Because if I know what they're looking for, then I can pare down and say, okay, well, that's an extra bell and whistle. That's not necessary. And I can simplify, especially because right now the web design trend is towards simplification. Everybody wants it clean. They want it low latency. They want it to load fast, read smoothly. We're even cutting down on pictures, which is kind of nice for new web developers. You don't need to spend as much time searching for good imagery as you used to. Okay.
What about
So
accessibility?
Accessibility is also an important factor. Fortunately, that's part of why we like HTML5. When I teach HTML5, I'm constantly reminding people that you don't know how good you've had it, because we used to develop our code and then think about accessibility, whereas a lot of HTML5's features kind of handle accessibility for us by just labeling our data properly. Then it can be handled properly by the browser and or other screen reading devices. All right. So before I spend the whole class talking about that, let me just pop up the ideas just to make sure. I'm sure, like I said, beating stuff into the ground. Going to pull up the PowerPoint that I put out for last class, which you have a very similar one. I think it's probably just a different theme. Basically, if you guys can see this, it is the image from the book about what an HTML document looks like. Can anybody give me a brief overview of just why HTML? Like, what's the benefit of HTML? Why do we bother with it? Why do we do it?
Easy language is related to English. It's not really something too complicated to learn.
Okay, that's definitely a good reason. That's why we are doing it here. But what's its reason for existing? Why was it developed in the first place?
I forget the name of the company that or group, their name, that they set the standard for web language, and they chose HTML because, well, HTML5 in this case, because the last one, what was it about the last one?
HTML2. HTML2.
I forget the name of it, but there were different ones, and they just wanted a more universal or widely accepted one that we could all use.
Yeah, a standard. Yeah.
So basically, what happened, if you go back to the beginning, who developed the internet? Just kind of generally speaking, like who built the internet? Before there was the internet, there was the ARPANET. And ARPA came from DARPA, which was the government agency responsible for inventing things for the military. Because what happened was, as soon as we realized that we could nuke a city, and if we nuked a city, we could wipe it just entirely off the map. Then our military very quickly realized that if we can do that to someone else, they're going to be able to do that to us, and we can't have command structure fall apart. So they're like, we want this communication network that can't be disrupted so that we can still pass around orders and information, even if we're under this major attack. But see, the military doesn't actually build anything. They need guys like MIT and Berkeley to build things for them. So they have the academics build stuff. And while they're building this communications network, they're using the communication networks to test it and evaluate it and share information about how to build it. And they start passing around their research papers. But I don't know if you know anything about a research paper, is that they are long and lots of text. And so they very quickly realized to make a research paper readable in this text format, and I'm going to pull up Visual Studio Code here to just show you a little bit of the difference. If I want to make a research paper readable, and this is just my resume, this is not even that bad. You've got to be able to space it out. You got to be able to put headings in it. You've got to be able to label what's in a list. You've got to be able to do these things to make information readable. And so that was the original goal, is they just were trying to divide up research papers. So the initial HTML that we deal with is all the stuff that you can think of when you think of, if I'm writing a paper, what do I need? You get headings, you get subheadings, you get lists, you get paragraphs of text, you get links so that you can jump to other research papers and you can jump down to your footnotes. And like that's HTML1, is all these basic things. And then they started adding images and they started adding tables. And then once they added tables, people started realizing that if I treat my entire website like a table, then I can draw anything I want because I can just define my table and treat it like graph paper. And I can draw boxes using my tables and move data around and come up with desktop publishing on the internet. Once we started doing that, that horrified the data scientist people. So the data scientist people quickly were like, no, we can't use tables. And so they said, all right, if you just want to use boxes to lay things out, we're going to make up these boxes for you to use. Because don't call table data or don't call information tables when it's not a table. Because it's just, you can't, it's a layout of your page. We used to actually cut pictures into pieces. And we put this little corner of the picture in this table cell, and this corner of the picture in this table cell, and this corner of the picture in this table cell. And so we could make a rounded border by cutting a picture into like 15 parts. It was a nightmare. And if somebody resized their window, it all fell apart. So we came up with a better way of doing that. And we came up with divs. Anybody want to tell me what is a div? D-I-V.
I always sort of looked at it as a division.
A division. Something like that. So what's a division?
It's how you divide
It's
up the sections. You know, how you divide up your page.
It's a box. That's all it is.
Okay.
It's just a box. We say, all right, we want to draw a box here. So we divided the page. And then likewise for text, we had spans. What does span mean? It means from here to here. Literally, it means from here to here. That is a span. The distance between something. A span. So we have these meaning because we're like, oh, we're going to make HTML so powerful. We'll make it so flexible. And then everybody used divs and spans to do the exact same thing. I always argue that there's basically 5 websites in the whole world. If I say this is a commercial website, you picture that in your head. And you know it's got a banner at the top. It's got probably 2 columns. It's got a menu on one side or across the top. And it's got a grid of things you can buy, right? That's a commercial website. If you have a news website, you tend to have a column down the middle. Maybe you have some information and links on one side. You have some information and links and advertising on the other side. Banner across the top. Same thing. If you want to play a movie, there's stuff at the top, data at the bottom, box of table of data. That's it. That's what a movie website looks like. And so over and over, we were given fantastic cosmic power, and we used it the exact same way. We all couldn't reinvent what publishing has been working on for thousands of years. You know, we have been deciding what looks good on paper, what looks good on a screen for a very, very long time now. And so we kind of know. And so we all ended up inventing the same thing. But as we went, we made it harder and harder for somebody with different abilities, you know, talk about accessibility issues, we made it harder and harder for people with different abilities or computers to understand what the intent was behind what we were doing. So we came up with a standard. We said, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to start labeling the pieces so that people can look at the labels and they'll know what my intent was. And so it turns out almost everybody wants a header at the top, some kind of a footer at the bottom, some sort of main area, and we had to label it. This is a div, this is our div that's a header. This is a div, this is our div that's a footer. This is the div, this is a div that is the main area, this is a div that's our article. And we would literally have to type the same stuff over and over and over again. And so finally with HTML5, they said, what if we just use the words that everybody's already using? So instead of labeling stuff, we just use the label. And we say, this is a header. This is main. This is our footer. And that's where we're at now. We're at this in theory, golden age where everything is super simple and super obvious, and all we have to do is make it pretty. That's the goal. Doesn't really meet reality, but that's the goal. The idea is you should at least be able to guess what it is you're looking for because you speak English. If English is not your native language, it is less helpful to you. But you should label things according to their meaning. And that's where we're at now. So that is the review of 3, 4, and 5. We already talked, you should have gotten really up close and familiar with what HTML looks like, what an HTML tag looks like. And so now we're going to go through a real quick process of downloading and installing stuff if you haven't. And then we'll kind of talk about what is in section 5. So you should have, as we were discussing before class, everybody should have been added to the Adobe campus group. And it looks like this morning, most of you got removed and re-added. But ideally, knock on wood, cross your fingers, you should be able to come here and hit sign on and then just sign in with your Wake Tech address. So mine's at Wake Tech because I'm a teachie, but yours will be the My Wake Tech. And you should just be able to log in here and have it bring you to the single sign-on that you've seen a lot. You know, mine is already logged in, so I didn't even have to enter my password. But it pops you out to Wake Tech, you log in and pops back. Then once you click on your little icon up here and say View Account, you should see a bunch of stuff included in your plan that you are allowed to play with because you are in CTI-110. I will point out that Adobe. Go ahead.
I was just saying mine was working before they did the remove and add, and it still shows the same thing, available in your plan and all the different things that you're looking at right now.
It does show the different things?
Yes, I can
Or does not
download
now?
any of them. It does
Yeah.
show them and I can
Yeah.
download them.
So that's where you should be. If you are not seeing at least Dreamweaver included in our plan, email the help desk immediately, helpdesk@waketech.edu, and then hopefully we'll get it fixed very, very fast for you guys.
They
So
told me
that's how it should work.
when I was on the help desk, they told me to call Adobe.
Okay, if they tell you that, I can grab his name. I will drop the name of the actual IT person who's responsible for it, and you can tell help desk you want to open a ticket for, I think it's Chris McCann, something like that. I'll get his name and make sure it's in chat. Because I was told to email the help desk, is what I was told to do. All right, so that's the first. Go ahead.
Because also once you get it, once I had it, I installed it. I downloaded and installed it on my desktop. So even when they told me that it wasn't installed, I can still get it because it's on my desktop.
Yeah. So what you want to do is go ahead and download and install Dreamweaver. And the other thing that you are going to want to do is come into Cengage.com, and I cannot figure out how to make this show you what a student would see. So yours is going to be a little bit different, but you're looking for the in unit 2, in lesson 5, in the required reading, there's an ISBN number right here. So the ISBN number is right, and read this before you begin. And if you click here, it gives you instructions for finding the data files. And basically, you come on to Cengage, you search that ISBN number, and you're looking for the student companion site. And that student companion site looks like this. And you can say book resources data files. And these data files you are going to need for this unit 2. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a quick break here. And if anyone's got any questions about what's going on, I can help you with that. I'm going to run and grab a drink real quick. But that's where we need to be, is we need to have people installing Dreamweaver, and we need to have people downloading and installing these data files and unzipping chapter 1 to some place that makes sense to them. So for me, I just have, I'll show you what we got. For me, I have, where's my share window? So I've got a CTI-110 folder in my OneDrive, called it Unit 2, and then I unzip chapter 1 here, and this is what I've got. It's just a bunch of files that match the textbook examples. So let me run grab a drink, and when I get back, if you guys have any questions, or do you have someone who have a question before I go?
How did you get there again? Could you like show me the process one more time?
Sure. What I did is I just went to cengage.com and logged in. And then when it said search for products, I grabbed the ISBN number
Where did
from
you get the number?
Blackboard.
Can you share your screen,
I'm
sir?
sorry.
As you do it?
Yeah. So in lesson 5, there's an ISBN number in the required reading, right in this very first one. And I can go, actually, you know what? I'll go ahead and drop it into chat here too. And then I went to cengage.com and searched for that ISBN number. And it showed me our book. And then I clicked on resources. And this may look a little bit different for students. I can't promise what it looks like for students. But what you're looking for is this student companion site. And I believe that Ms. Holliday also put this into Blackboard somewhere. Maybe in the course, yeah. So I think it's actually this file right here, if you don't want to go through the other process. But if you want the rest of the files, I think it should be this file right here. All right, I will be right back. I'm going to refill my drink. I've got 143, so let's come back at 155, and then we will kind of quickly gloss over features of Dreamweaver and get us started there.
Michael, we hear your mechanical keyboard.
Sorry.
I don't mind.
Has everyone had any problems?
Creative
Kind
Cloud.
of
What are
making
we?
sense.
Yeah, I can't find the
So what can't you find, Michael?
companion site.
Can you maybe share your screen and see if we can figure it out together?
Potentially. Hang on.
It's okay if not. It should be right next to your mute and camera button.
Yeah, I'm using my phone for the call, so I actually have a proper camera.
Oh, all right. No worries. I was just hoping that we could take a look and figure it out, because it's kind of hard for me to tell without.
So I tried to to go from the email. Is that not an option from the email that was sent that gave us the new one?
It should work fine as far as I know. You just need to get to the part where
it says get
ask
started.
you to download stuff.
I did download something, but it's circling like crazy. Not opening.
I'm going to kind of wait.
I have a question too.
All right.
All right. I'm at the point where it says before you read this before you begin, and that there has the ISBN number. Do you click on read the do you click on the link that says read this before you begin and then that opens up Cengage? Or is there where's the other place you said that there was a link that it was a zip file?
So
was that
if
in chapter 1?
The actual the file that you're looking for is under your course resources. I realized that while we were talking.
Course resources. Okay.
So she's gone ahead and provided
Gotcha.
it for you.
I see it
right here in course resources. If you click on the read this before you begin, it basically just gives you instructions on how to or it gives you bad data. It just gives you instructions. Where is that? Did that not even pop up? Let's try this again. Fun with Cengage. There we go. Third time's the charm, apparently. It just gives you instructions on how to download that data file. So it says, they say, open up your browser and go to cengagebraid.com and then search for the ISBN and then look for free materials and access now is what students should be seeing, I guess. But like I said, it is already linked for you in course resources. So. I give people a couple more minutes. Any other questions while we're sitting around?
I'm trying to figure out what we're supposed to be. Is it supposed to be saying Creative Cloud?
So as long as it says Creative Cloud right here and also gives your Dreamweaver, then you can either download Dreamweaver directly or download Creative Cloud and use that to install Dreamweaver, which I think is the preferred path right now. So I was going to show you Creative Cloud after the break because I know some people might not be here. But if you go ahead and download Creative Cloud Desktop and install that, it'll let you install Dreamweaver straight from that.
Okay, mine is installing Creative Cloud now.
Okay. And just for fun, if you guys want to talk about reading white papers in text, this is what my master's thesis looks like with all the formatting removed. Could you imagine if you actually had to read like this? This is why HTML exists, is right here, having to try and read something like this and get actual information out of it. And even this has some basic HTML1 headings already built into it. So it's not as bad as it could be. Could you imagine reading it like that with no headings? So that is the problem we are trying to solve in this class.
I have Dreamweaver installed. Is there anything else that we should install?
If you've got the data files in Dreamweaver, you are set. Let me give people a couple more minutes in case anybody wandered away. Since I did say 153.
Can I share my screen and see if this is what we're supposed to have unpacked?
Mm-hmm.
Which is this one. Is that right?
Hold on, I'm not. Didn't have my shared content. Yep, that looks right.
Okay, awesome, awesome. Thank you.
Sure thing. Rochelle, it is possible that you had a free trial of WinRAR installed at some point that's run out, and so now it's telling you to purchase WinRAR, but you shouldn't need to do that. The built-in so are you on a Mac or are you on a Windows machine? Because Windows has the ability built in to unzip everything. Mac, you might need to get a tool to do it. Yeah, you should be able to just right click because you are downloading. It is a zip file, yeah. So you should be able to download it and then right click it and extract it. Let me download it real quick. So you should be able to simply right click and see I've got open with WinRAR options here, but I also have this extract all option here. So I can just say extract all and have it drop it down in this page. And then we only need Dreamweaver chapter 1, which is this one right here. If you are having problems with that, I'm gonna have to put a pin in that because otherwise we're gonna end up talking the whole time, and not actually talking about the basics of how Dreamweaver works. So what I want to do is cover a little bit about what chapter 1 and chapter 2 are covering to make sure we're kind of staying on pace. And then after we're done, I'll come back and I'll see if I can help you guys. All right. So you should have installed Dreamweaver through the, or be in the process of installing Dreamweaver through the Creative Cloud. The Creative Cloud desktop is basically Adobe's way of wrapping all their program together into this one updater. It also comes with cloud storage that you can use. Since you have OneDrive with Campus, using Adobe's cloud storage over OneDrive doesn't really have any advantages, but it is something that is available for you and it'll get prompted. You have all these tools that you can use. And what you want to do, if you haven't yet done it, is search for Dreamweaver. And mine says open, but it'll ask you if you want to install it, kind of like this one says install, but for Dreamweaver. So you just hit install, run it, open it up, and then that's where we're at. The point of today's lesson is to go through Dreamweaver, come back to our lesson, and basically it's an introduction to Dreamweaver guided tour. In chapter 1, it mostly describes things. So if you come into the required reading, you've got read this before you begin, guide to using Creative Cloud, and then the really important bits are the chapter 1 and chapter 2. Chapter 1 is taking you through Dreamweaver, and it's showing you all the things that are available with Dreamweaver. Like, here's all your menus, here's all the things. Let's get to know the graphic interface. Then chapter 2, it starts to walk you through how you would work on a web page in Dreamweaver using those data files that we downloaded from either course resources or from Adobe. In chapter 2, it's got a bunch of parts where it gives you instructions for what to do. So let's see if we can actually get this to load up. It's going to be fussy at me today. So as you go through, it'll say something like, add some text to this part of the heading. It walks you through and it says, use these tools, create some head properties, open up this property, look at that, and goes through it. What you're supposed to do is all these places where it tells you to change something, like I'm trying to find an example. So find this, edit a page title. As you go through it, it'll tell you to open up the index, load up that page, go in and change the file. It tells you what to do. What you should instead do is do whatever you want. Follow the same instructions, but you don't need to type what they say word for word. You should add whatever comes to mind just to customize it a little bit. Like maybe you're looking at it and you're saying, I think it should say something else. Or I think that the color should be different, or I want to make my headings bigger. You should just tweak settings and play with it as you go so that your site doesn't look exactly like everybody else's site. And then when you get through the end of the tutorial, you just take a screenshot of whatever it is you changed and how it looks because you changed that, and that's what you'll be turning in at the end of the lesson. So the reading is kind of also the lab this week, but it's just walking you through capabilities of Dreamweaver and getting you some practice. So let's take a look at what Dreamweaver looks like and what we'll be doing. So I'm going to jump into the PowerPoint for a second here. And then we'll jump over into Dreamweaver. But basically, if you've worked with any kind of modern Windows-based tool, Dreamweaver works like a lot of those do. And so a lot of this is going to be review. It's got menus, it's got panels, it's got buttons you can pick, and it's got ways of clicking on things and what are called panes. Does anyone know what a pane is in Windows terms, just kind of off the top of your head?
Things like the weather app in the Windows start bar or whatever it is.
Kinda, yeah. So when you think of it as a window in your house has individual panes that are like little mini glass windows. And you've got a bunch of panes together and it makes up a window. Same thing with modern appliances, or not modern appliances, modern applications now. they have what we used to call docking areas, where you can take a smaller window and just kind of park it on part of your screen. Because you can do that, the Dreamweaver layout is very, very flexible. You should note that this book was chosen because it's one of the few good books I could find about Dreamweaver, not because it is the most modern, most up-to-date book. It is enough to get you through the basics of Dreamweaver, but it is based on older versions. This, I think, is based on Dreamweaver 19, I want to say, and ours is 2021. And so that some things have changed. Nothing that matters to us should have changed that I'm aware of. I haven't found anything critical yet. It's mostly advanced features that have changed. But if things are different, then it's possible that the defaults are either different or just in a slightly different location. And so you need to just kind of actively look for stuff. Don't just assume because it's not exactly where the book shows it that it's not still visible to you on your screen. And we'll jump into Dreamweaver and talk about it in a second. But like, this is what our book says it should look like. And as you know, basic Windows stuff. It's got a menu bar at the top. It's got the file you're working with. And this is the standard view that has the kind of graphic representation of your window here. It's got a way to switch how you look at your window. It's got panels, and it tells you can resize your panels. Basic layout of the screen. How ours actually is going to look is something a little bit more similar to this. Notice that they've made it a little bit sleeker, what they consider more cutting edge. Most of the Adobe products have gone to this almost like a flat look to it instead of like three-dimensional buttons and things like that. But it's got the same rough things. We've got the same switcher, same menus, slightly different options in the middle compared to the book, but still a image of our website. What is mostly different is that by default, this property window isn't open. So if you want to see that, okay, so I'm in split view. Let's come back to live view. This is more or less what Dreamweaver looks like. I'm in the dark theme because, you know, I like it. You've got the layout of the HTML document is over here on the right. You've got an insert menu right here. The files menu is now a file tab in that same panel. You could switch between views up here at the top. And this is standard view. Developer view looks like this. Looks like your Notepad++ basically. But the standard view is this kind of graphic view. And that's really why we are using Dreamweaver, is this ability to draw things out, make them look how we want to look, and then flip over to code and say, okay, this is what I just did. And notice that, you know, we talked about the strategies of how HTML evolved. This is all body, div, but it does have a header, it does have nav. And so this is kind of a mix between HTML4 and HTML5. Notice that over here in the insert menu, you can add HTML5 elements like our header, navigation, main, and aside. So we're fully capable of developing pretty usable code using Dreamweaver. So when Dreamweaver first pops up, though, you might not have, it's probably going to look something like this. You might not have your property window. To get your property window, you need to open up the window menu and select property. And then it'll pop up It could be a floating window, and then you can just drag it down to the button. See that it turns blue, and that means I'm dropping it there and lay it out. Now, when I click on things in this property, it tells me everything I need to know about that. If I want to change how things look, I can change it to different kinds of text.
I
I
don't
can do
know
all
if
kinds of
anybody
different
else
stuff.
can't see, but I can't see all the way to the left of the screen.
Okay.
What
Yeah,
you're
it's
pointing
you.
at.
What is all the way?
Looks like you're showing your PowerPoint down at the bottom,
Okay.
and your
Sorry, I meant to stop. I meant to stop that. Is that better? Now can you see it better?
it still looks like, well, yeah, I guess it's kind of like taking a picture of your taking a picture of your picture in the thing, but it's a little bit better than what it was.
Well, I can try sharing it directly through Teams. That usually comes out even less good for me. That's why I was trying it this way.
Oh, that's
Can
much
you
better.
see it better
Yes.
now?
Yes, that's much better.
All right. All right. So all I was saying was that you've got this window bar at the top, and your properties may not be enabled by default. So you probably want to open that up to follow along in the book. But this is just generally what it looks like. And this is going to, and our book is going to take us through each piece of it and doing things like coming in here and picking on the body and saying, okay, I'm going to change the document title, and I'm going to change it to Ryan's Striped Umbrella Hotel, or whatever it is, resort. And that's what I was saying about customizing it as you go. When it gives you instructions to change things, feel free to just modify it slightly, play with things, play with the colors of things, like make the text all pretty colored. You know, that's a much more attractive color scheme. Yay. Maybe not. But just play with stuff. That's the moral of the story is, as we go through, make sure you play with stuff. So this is what our Dreamweaver should look like. This is what we're going to work with. And we'll just be flipping back and forth between code, live, or if you want, you can split, have your view on top with your code in the bottom. And as you click on things, notice that it is highlighting the HTML down in the bottom that made the thing that you're clicking on. You can type in the top and notice it updates the bottom. So that's why we're using, that's why we're using Dreamweaver. So we can kind of do this guided practice and not have to memorize as much HTML, but do it through practice. In future courses, if you go on to do Web 115, Web 140, they expect you to be able to type the HTML without using an editor like this. So that's kind of why we're easing you into that in this course. All right, let's jump back over into the PowerPoint. It's just going to talk you through the stuff that the book brings up. So we've got a document window, which is that large area where we create it, with a menu bar. Just like everything else, that's where our tools, our file menu, our view menu, and our help bar is right here in that menu bar. We're going to have an insert panel that we looked at that has different elements in it, what they consider 8 categories of buttons. It's got common, structure, media, and forms. So common are just generic buttons that you might have, like divs and images, paragraphs and lists. Structure is for those nice HTML5 elements to lay things out and give it some kind of meaningful structure. And then medias and forms are kind of what they say they are. We'll be using them to add media and forms, add images, add forms when we get to forms. That document toolbar tells you the name of the file that you're opening and the work mode you're in. lets you decide if you want to use live view or see the code as you edit it. I personally recommend that you have the code open while you use the visual editor on the top. I think that it'll be a lot smoother for you. Likewise, and jumping over, I'm going to jump back over to Dreamweaver. Likewise, this is our related files list. Can anyone guess how it knows what those related files are? Like, where does it get those from?
Only thing I really can't see it too well. But if that's the CSS and stuff like that that is asking about, that's usually defined in the code at the top, called where you have references and links and stuff like that.
Exactly. It's got the CSS, it's got 2 CSS files and a JavaScript file. And what it's literally doing is reading that file. It's telling you what you've linked to, what you've put into your header and made a reference to with a link tag. It's just reading the code and then displaying it back to you so you know whether it works. It's really it's kind of like a browser in that way, in that it's just interpreting it and spitting it back to you. All right. When you're coding, you can pull up the coding toolbar and it gives you it'll pull up some buttons. I don't think that may be the one big difference is I'm not sure that it is a full-on coding toolbar anymore, so much so as it adds some buttons to the main toolbar that's on the left. But that's the one discrepancy I've noticed so far. The property inspector is that property pane that we already pulled up, and it tells you things like what is the CSS for a given element, what is set in the HTML for that element. And so, for example, if you click on an image, it will tell you the source of that image. If you've set a default size for that image, it'll tell you the size of that image. If you click on a link, it'll tell you where that link goes, that kind of thing. That'll all be in the properties toolbar, so you can look at it as you go. So the status bar is right above the toolbar. It's that little strip that tells you where you are. It basically says, if you start typing, this is what you'll be typing into. And it talks about what panels are these tab group of information. And it shows you what the tab panels are. Ours looks slightly different, but they are still there. Kind of tells you how to dock it.
I'm still,
Go for it.
my Dreamweaver is downloaded and it asks me, do I want the developer workspace or the standard workspace? Which one am I supposed to get?
Go ahead and put standard.
Okay.
Standard will give you the
Thank you.
lesson interface.
I downloaded. I did the developer. Maybe that's why mine looks a little different.
That's okay. You just flip that switch up on the top right. All that's really asking is, do you want to see the pretty live view or do you want to see the code view? And so you can switch back and forth through it really easily.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
As a matter of fact, that's just what it was saying. A view is a particular way of displaying that content. The standard view is set up with the things, assuming that you're going to try and visually edit your page, whereas the code view doesn't have the insert tabs and stuff displayed. So going right off of what you said, up here in the top right, I've got a standard versus developer view switch. And I can even change my own. So if I want it to look a certain way, I want my properties, if imagine I worked in it all the time, I could set up all my windows the way I wanted it to and save it as a workspace. But otherwise, I've got developer, which is basically just code view, and standard, which gives you all the drag and drop type stuff. And as I said before, I like to go into the split view. So I bring it back up. Right here in the middle, I've got split view. By default, standard is, it's not going to let me change it. Okay, there we go. By default, standard is in live view, which is what you see is what you get. But you can also switch back into code view if you want to. I think the split view is the nicest for learning if you've got the screen real estate for it. All right. Oops, wrong one. Okay. So a lot of this is very reading the screen to you. So I recommend you go through this. And like I said, you need to read chapter 1 and read chapter 2 carefully and just get to know some of this stuff. I'm just trying to go over these major features, how to load files and all that. So that's the code and design view. The most important thing is when you start creating your individual website, you can create basically like a project folder. What you want to do is you want to have one central place that has your files and only your files, and we're going to build all of that. Typically, we'll also have a subfolder in it where you'll store images, and often you'll have your CSS in a different subfolder. I don't want to spend a lengthy amount of time talking about how file systems work. There should be links in your course resources and in your Unit 0 that can help you if you're not good with file systems. But you want to basically set up an organized place for all of your stuff to be. In our file panel for our project, we'll be able to create a specific local folder, and we're going to use that for our final project. So give it some sort of name that you can find. And when we go through our project examples, we'll be using that, and we'll use the file to swap back and forth to their example. So we're going to get into sites, I think, next week, I believe. So for right now, we're just going to be kind of operating with these individual files, but eventually we're going to be using that file folder or the file panel to organize our data. So over here, if you click, you've got insert. If you click on the files, you can just arrange things, and we'll eventually click on this manage sites, and we'll create a place for our stuff by having a specific site folder that we've designated. All right. Just a reminder that once we have set all this up and started working, we need to also plan for testing our website. We need to plan for loading things up, not just in Dreamweaver, but also in Chrome. We should use validators as well as multiple different website browsers to make sure it works. Why is that? Why do we need different browsers to make sure it works?
Since different browsers support different things. For example, one of them don't support plugins anymore, right? So stuff like that. If you ever use, you got to make sure, you just got to make sure it works and renders properly. There's different sizes, all kinds of things.
Yeah, and there are different defaults for everything. And so if you don't put deliberate effort into resetting defaults, it's just going to look different in different browsers, because Apple says, well, this is the way Apple does buttons, and it puts a button style into their buttons. and it adds some space around form elements so it looks more Apple-y. And Edge does a very similar thing where it doesn't support certain standards. It spaces out some of its form elements in particular. Different browsers indent list items slightly differently by default. And so if you're counting on your browser working in a certain way, you have to hope that the person who's eventually looking at your website is using your same browser. Because if they're not using your browser and you haven't tested their browser, you don't know what kind of an experience they're actually having. And if, our end goal is to get a job, that can be really problematic. Now, we may not have to support every single possible thing, and that's fine. Especially some of the newer privacy browsers have kind of reduced capabilities on purpose because they're trying to make sure you can't be tracked and things like that. And it's up to you whether you want to support those or not. If you don't support those, it's fine, but you should be aware of, what percent, use someone like Google to tell you what percentage of your traffic is coming from those browsers. To decide, is this a problem or not? Well, it's not a problem if it's not enough people for me to care about. It is a problem if it is the people I care about. There's always a balance with web design for how good you actually need it to be, because if you try to support everybody, that can be just really problematic. And then finally, we're eventually going to use some publishing tools, and our chapter kind of walks us through where our publishing tools are. And we're actually going to publish our website in two different ways. We're going to publish it using a GitHub and upload it to GitHub, and we're going to publish it using the FTP server that our department has. And so we're going to build our websites locally. We're going to publish them out to share them and display them to each other. Then we're going to have our peers look at our websites and kind of decide whether or not they think we've put a lot of effort into it, what suggestions they have, whether or not they think it meets our purposes. And then we will do peer reviews, and that is your final project. So your final project is actually going to be built as we go. Hopefully you've already looked and noticed. And as we build it, we're going to keep asking for people's input on what we do. And then it's up to you. Maybe you change it according to their input. Maybe you decide that you like it the way it is and you kind of reject their input. You are not going to be judged either way for that, as long as you meet the minimum requirements. It's really on whether or not you are doing a good job of achieving whatever your objective is. And so we're going to be doing FTP, blah, blah, blah. We'll eventually add some folders and pages. All right, chapter 2 is a lot more of the same, only chapter 2 really starts getting us into, here's how we can set heading and page content. Keep in mind that the background color is the color that fills the entire page. Usually if you have a solid background color, sometimes you just put a background color on individual elements, and that's still the background of that element. So make sure that you're thinking about whether the colors work together, whether there's good contrast. One tip that a lot of people like me who are not super well, what's the nicest way that I can phrase this? I am not the most artistically inclined person of all people. So a lot of times I get hung up on what is technically possible to do, and I struggle with deciding whether things look pretty or not, and whether colors work well together or not. I'm just like, these are colors. Either they're high contrast and I can read them, or I don't. I don't really worry about if I like them too much. But there are tools out there, and we will introduce tools through the course that will help you pick colors for your website. And one way of going about it is by taking an image very much like like this central image of your website. And there are tools that will pick colors out of this image. So if you've already decided this is an attractive image, there are tools out there, and if you notice, This tan on the beach is very similar to the tan of the wood here. And this blue of the menu is very similar to the blue of the ocean or the blue of the pool. And so we've got a light blue for the ocean and a dark blue for the pool, and their colors are kind of built around this image. If they need an accent color, maybe they would grab the green out of here, or the black out of here. And so that's one strategy that people use. If you want to have colors that work together to make your website pretty, you start with an image of what you want to represent the look and feel of your website, and then pick colors from that for those of us that are less artistically inclined. It's going to walk us through, our chapter is going to walk us through creating some head content and setting some page properties. And basically just says, hey, a CSS layout block or a CSS rule is this thing that you can create that allows us to add properties to elements. And those properties are everything that you can think of that you might change in a Microsoft Word document. The color of the text, the size of the text, what the alignment is, what direction the text goes in. All the properties that you can kind of imagine formatting in a document, there are properties for almost all of that. You'll set default colors and default link colors that it starts with the body, and everything inherits those properties down. So you'll say, okay, for my whole website, I want these to be my default colors. I'm going to put them into my CSS, and everything will inherit that down. And if I want it to be different, I'll use a CSS property on an individual block. So you may have this may be a thing that you know or a thing that you don't know, may have noticed. What's the default look? What's the default look for a link? Like when you picture an HTML link, what does that look like in your head?
It's like a light blue, like a baby blue.
Yeah, a baby blue and what?
Underlined.
Underline. Yeah. So that is called your text embellishment or your text decoration is the CSS property. And decorations are like underlining, strike through, overlining. Those are our text decorations. So our default link is usually a baby blue underlined text, but that is becoming more and more popular to at least turn off the underlining, because I think it just pops out too much, and people want stuff that is more blended in these days. And so a lot of times links are given colors that aren't standard. The standard is when you click on it, not the standard, but the default is usually baby blue. You click on it, it turns purple. And that gives us valuable information because we've all been kind of trained to that. Even though we may not have realized we've been trained to that, we all see that and know what is happening. So it is, for aesthetic reasons, it is not uncommon to change those things, but it's a very good idea to do something else to make sure that the user realizes that it's a link or that it's clickable. Either make it look like a button, give it some kind of an icon, especially make sure that when they mouse over it, your pointer turns to the little hand thing. Anything that acts like a link, it should have that little hand so you can click on it. All these little like subtle signs actually make our websites a lot more usable for people because we've all been trained in a certain way, whether we realize it or not. This is informational. You can use different color scheme notations, RGBA, red, green, blue, alpha, hex, or HSLA, which is hue, saturation, and lumens or I don't know, luster, something I can never remember. I never really, the HSL one, I think it's luminosity.
Oh, okay.
I think.
Sounds right.
It's like what shade it is, how much color there is, and how bright it is. is what I think HSLA stands for. It's never made a ton of sense to me. I'm not an art guy. The one that matters to me is that A. Does anyone know what the A stands for?
As if that how can you see through it type of thing?
Yeah, it's A is for alpha, which stands for the alpha channel, which says for what is transparent in an image. So A is how transparent or how opacity, I think is what you're trying to say. How opaque a thing is, which means you can get really fun effects by blending colors together. The downside is you can get accidental effects by blending colors together. So when you use partially sheer colors, make sure you're aware of it and make sure you think about how it layers down, because you don't want your lovely soft purple border becoming like an ugly puke brown because it's over top of blue or something, you know? Excuse me. Excuse me. But we have all kinds of tools with sliders so that we don't have to memorize what these colors are. The hex colors, we have, it's red, red, green, green, blue, blue. I'm pretty sure it's RGB. Red, red, green, green, blue, blue in hex representation for how intense it is. So white is like all the color, zeros is black, none of the color. Color theory is not my thing. Feel free to look up additional resources and share them with a class if you enjoy them. The point being, you can pick a color, and what I use is I use palette picker websites to tell me what those colors should be and generate palettes, or I make the art department tell me what my colors should be. We're going to be doing a lot of creating and importing text. So our book writes us through kind of what some of our text import options are. And that's why we went ahead and wrote some text this last week, so that when we get to the part, we can focus on making a pretty page and we can just copy our text into it. So another thing that it'll do is it will preserve formatting and generate clean HTML code, which means it will try to make bold things bold. If you're cutting and pasting from like Microsoft Word and it can find the font, it will try to add the correct fonts onto it. It will also try and do that in a way that minimizes extra coding. What that means for your instructor is that Dreamweaver doesn't leave many telltale signs that it did something. And so when we get to the assignments that we're saying, okay, now that we've learned to do this in Dreamweaver, you need to do this in Notepad, it is going to be an honor-based system, whether you do it in Notepad. The reason we have you do it both ways is because in future courses, you're going to need to do it both ways. And so it is to your benefit to actually attempt it both ways. If you cheat, you are only costing yourself learning at that point, and you're not figuring out what you have problems with. There's also a benefit to typing HTML up for the same reason why you type up other coding languages, is that finding typos is a huge part of what software developers actually do. And so getting in the habit of recognizing a typo and saying, oh, I missed a quotation mark, I missed a less than or greater than bracket in my tag. Finding those is incredibly valuable learning. And if you try to get out of doing that, it is definitely costing you something in a way that's not particularly easy to detect. So it's just kind of a waste of time for everybody if you don't at least try. Now, fonts. Who can tell me what a font actually is?
Isn't it
Like
just the way the text
theoretically,
looks?
it's the way the text looks, but it's a file that describes the way text looks. If you've got a font called Times New Roman, There's a file on your computer somewhere called timesnewroman.ttf or .font somewhere. And there's an actual file that interprets characters and says, this is how you draw that. Because of that, there's no guarantee that anyone on the internet has the same fonts that you do. Back in the day, it used to be a thing that nerdy kids like me did, was go out to these free font websites and you'd get all kinds of crazy fonts. The problem is if you try to put them on your website, the user will look at that font. It'll try to say, hey, do you have, Dracula's teeth 93? And if you don't, you just don't get it. It will try to fall back to, you can either give it a list of options to try, or it gets just a generic font from your system. Adobe works around that by providing access to specific fonts called Edge Web Fonts that will serve up fonts if you have the right to use them. Now, Adobe monetized that, and so of course that's what the book encourages you to use, but Google did the exact same thing. So if you need a font, you can go to fonts.google.com and it will just give you tons and tons of free font options, and you can use those to pretty up your website. So this talks about Typekit and says use their font. Talks about the way, just what we said. They're different because we use different technologies, different files. And finally get to cascading style sheets. All right, who can tell me what cascading style sheets mean? Let's back up. What does it mean to cascade?
Cascade is like a trickle down.
Kind of like a trickle down. What does it imply? That there is more than one stop as you fall, right?
Yeah.
Like we think of a waterfall just goes straight down, but a cascading waterfall goes down to a pool, goes down to a pool, goes down to a pool. So what a cascading style sheet is a bunch of rules that we fall through. So for cascading style sheets, we are identifying parts of our website that we want to change. We are setting the properties that we want it to have, and we're able to do that as many times as we want to. And it will fall down through them. And there are rules for which ones are more important than other rules. And so you can say this rule is important, so it sticks, and this rule is less important, so it doesn't change. But the idea is it goes through all these rules and it figures out what the end result is by looking at all the rules as it goes. If it gets to another rule that applies, it just updates and keeps moving, and then updates and keeps moving. We like CSS because we can set these rules and define a really custom feel to our entire website and make it clean and consistent without having to type a bunch of code over and over and over again. This is called dry computing or dry programming. Does anyone know what dry stands for? It stands for don't repeat yourself. What cascading style sheets let you do is you can write it once and then all your pages say, yeah, let me use those colors. Let me use that color scheme. Let me use that layout. If you want to change it, you change it once. And it just magically updates all your web pages. So that's what we're going to learn to do, is we're going to learn to set up some CSS rules, and we're going to learn to make it easy for us to have a custom look and feel across the website. It helps us separate our content from design. Why? Again, why? Why do we want to separate content from design? We said it makes it easier. Easier for what?
Easier
If you,
to
y'all go
correlate,
first.
or differ,
Easier to
make it different from what is actually displayed. So like say you want to show yourself working on your tech, but you want to reference information regarding the tech field that doesn't pertain to the image.
okay. Maybe someone else want to take a crack?
I was thinking you can separate it and you can make your behavior different from your appearance. And on your CSS, you can show how it looks and feels and how pretty it is, and then you can do the HTML or just how it functions.
Yeah. And the reason for that, again, is jumping back to what we said about testing for different browsers, is that we're really in HTML targeting a bunch of different things all at once. We want it to look good on a desktop. We want it to look good on a phone. We want it to read well to a screen reader. And if we can separate the way it looks from the way it behaves and the way it's structured, then we can give a bunch of different looks to the same structure and it can just show up differently. There's a website, I'm going to type it into the chat that you can search for, called CSS Zen Garden. And it's the same code over and over and over again, and people just write different themes for it. They just write different appearances for it. And so they can take the same HTML and make a radically different website by making the appearance change. And it's so extreme. If I weren't close to the end of class, I would show you right now. So I highly recommend you guys check it out. But the appearance changes are so extreme that you honestly wouldn't believe it's the same website sometimes. So that's what it allows us to do. By separating form and function, we can change the form however we want, and it still functions the same. So blah, blah, blah. Editing content and formatting content are two separate tasks. Basically, the idea is we can use CSS to theme our websites, and we can change things rapidly. Then it just talks about decoration. So I'm definitely getting to the part where it's just reading to you at this point, reminding you to check your links. I think we're essentially done for today. Yeah, it goes into adding links that we're going to get to. You have a history panel, so you can undo stuff as you go if you need to, and say, oh, I made a mistake. Let me go back and fix it, which is always a very useful thing. Because again, we're using Dreamweaver because it's helping us with the implementation stage so that we can focus on designing something and we can start getting our head wrapped around the concepts of what we're trying to do. I would like to go ahead and end us here so that if anyone has questions, they can go ahead and ask questions. If anybody has technical support questions, I've got about 15 to 20 minutes-ish that I can stay after class to help people out. So does anyone have any question for me before I kind of release the masses?
I have a statement.
Go ahead.
I will say I really enjoyed this class. It was very real world. I'm a retired developer. I retired, but I want to go back. I just want to do something different. So that's the reason I'm taking classes. I don't want to do the same thing I did before. And going through this, and for example, knowing your target audience and things of that nature, that's real world stuff. You need to know who your customer is, and the way you have us document it, write it out, have it critiqued by your peers. It's very real world. So I gotta hand it to you. You did it so far. You did a good job on your putting it together. So
thank you. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
My question, say something, Michael?
Yeah, my question is regarding the lesson. In the book, it tells us to consult with our instructor about an FTP address for the lesson.
That'll be like week 9 or lesson 9 or 10.
So should we just leave that off and not worry about it for now and just continue?
Yeah, just go shooting past it.
Okay.
the FTP stuff is definitely not set up for us yet. Any other questions? All right, Rochelle's waiting for Dreamweaver. That's good. Somebody else was having, Adam, did you manage to get the code unzipped? Or the data files unzipped, I should say. All right, well, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording and let you guys duck out if you don't have questions. I'm going to stick around for, like I said,